Just because this is a funny anecdote to start the video on, just to give you a sort of insight into my process, or what can laughingly be called a process. I was just convincing myself that I'd done everything to get ready for the recording session, and I said to myself, oh yes, now let's just start with a clap test, which is when you're trying to sync two unrelated bits of audio, or like audio to a video or something. You're supposed to like clap while doing something else, or something, some two obvious sounds that you can sync together in post. And I suddenly said, what am I doing? I'm just recording into a microphone. Why do I need to do a clap test? But it was only as I was clapping that I went, oh hang on, no, I don't need to do that. Another extremely unprofessional thing is I'm opening my very loud fizzy water bottle, because no matter how many times I try and clear my throat for these recordings, it never seems to work. One tricky thing is with this new microphone setup, I'm borrowing my partner's microphone. I'm a thief, I'm playing their Elden Ring and I'm stealing their microphone. Another awkward thing about this setup is I don't seem to be able to mute it, so I just have to like lean away for my usual coughing sessions, which is probably why I coughed 12,000 times. Anyway, in the space of a week, I've somehow played 30 hours of Satisfactory, and I'm not sure how I did that, because remember, I have a full-time job. I do an office job for 37 bloody hours a week, and I've somehow spent almost that amount of time in just over a week playing Satisfactory. Now, to be fair, Satisfactory is the sort of game where you'll just leave it running every time you go to the loo or cook dinner or whatever. But the story of Satisfactory for me is my friend a year or so ago said, oh, I'm enjoying this game called Satisfactory and we're looking for a game to play together, we should try Satisfactory. And I looked at it and it was like 30 quid on Steam, and I'm like, it's an early access, it's 30 quid, I don't know, because if you don't know me, I hardly ever buy games these days, certainly not like new games, you know, recently released games, because I've become one of those scoundrels who I rent most of my games. There's a great service in the UK called Boomerang where you can subscribe and they send you things on a subscription to rent. And there's also PlayStation Plus, which has just been improved to incorporate the PlayStation Now service I also used to have. Sometimes it scares me how much money I spend on these subscriptions, but genuinely it's still so much less than I used to spend buying every random game I might play 2 hours of and get bored, so it is an improvement anyway. But my friend was like, we should play Satisfactory, I think you'll like it, and we can play it together and I can teach you. And I was like, yeah, but it's 30 quid. But basically, eventually it was 40% off, and she called me at a weak moment, and I was like, fine, I'll play your fucking crack cocaine factory building game, which, as someone who became addicted to Minecraft and similar building games, you can just tell I'm going to get addicted to this. 33 hours later, I'm just watching footage I recorded as a test. It's amazing, it's great, it's the sort of early access game that you could have fooled me, you could have told me that it's finished and I would just believe you. It's not very buggy at all. It's genuinely, I've been playing Necromunda Hired Gun recently, and that is buggier. That is a released, not full price game, but released like cool looking, reasonably expensive looking shooter that has significantly more bugs than this early access indie game. I'm pretty sure it's indie, but I might be punching myself when I look that up in a minute. To cut to the chase, Satisfactory, which I'll probably accidentally call Factorio or Infinifactory at some point, because there are several factory games now with cult followings. You literally are dumped on an alien planet and you have to build something really simple like a smelter, and you find an iron seam, and you put a conveyor belt and you put the iron. Well, you start out by hand, even just grabbing materials by hand like Minecraft, punching trees, and you make the things. And then the game's like, oh well, that's good, well now can you make 200 of those? And you're like, oh shit, how do I do that? And the game's like, don't worry, we've just unlocked for you the ability to have an auto mining thing. And you're like, oh that's great, I'll just put the auto miner down and that'll mine iron for me while I'm crafting the other ones, and it'll be really efficient. And And once you've got one or two of those and you've got your next order in, it's like, hey, good, you're really doing really well. Now you can upgrade to a ginormous mining thing, which you're going to need, because now we need 1,000 iron ingots. And you're like, 1,000 iron ingots, that's going to take forever. But you work out through experimentation that, like for instance, sticking with the iron, one iron seam pours out more iron than I think one smelter can reasonably get through. So if you split the conveyor belt, which is another thing you unlock early on, you can split and merge conveyors into each other. So if you split the conveyor, you can actually get 2 loads of smelters going at once with one iron seam. And without looking very hard, I found just a shit ton of iron right at the beginning of the game. Iron is very much the beginner sort of mineral that you're not expected to run out of. And when I say run out, the resources don't seem to be limited in any way, really, from what I've seen. Like the iron seams and the coal seams and the copper seams, they're all infinite. The challenge isn't from running out of resources, the challenge is from kind of getting them from A to B in your factory efficiently and crafting them in a resource and time efficient way. So I'm looking at the footage. I've got a reasonably complicated factory after 30 hours. I've got iron, I've got coal. Coal is a very new and exciting thing for me, actually, because you don't start out with coal. You actually start out with you have to use a biomass generator that your little hub comes with, and you get biomass from leaves and animal parts and all that sort of thing. I'm going to cough. You get biomass from all these things, and biomass is fine, it's plentiful, but you do have to like go out and seek it. So as your factory gets bigger and more complicated, it obviously uses more power, and after a while I was finding I was spending a lot of time. I'd say about every half hour my bio generators would run out and I'd have to go and get some, and I ended up kind of preemptively doing that a lot. Because so long as your factory is happily churning away, you can just ignore it and go and add to your factory, or resources and stuff. But then you get the ability to smelt leaves and shit into biomass and solid biomass, which is much more efficient. But then again, you still end up, because you've got a more efficient fuel source, it ironically encourages you to escalate with more and more factory parts, which uses more and more power. So by the time you finally unlock coal, it is really, really useful. And I like any game that does this. I like any game where, I've always thought Saints Row 2 is a good example of this. I like any game where at the beginning you're forced to like walk with the plebs. I use pleb in an ironic sense. I think pleb is a sort of word that's hilarious because it feels like an old-fashioned, like classist insult to call someone. You're a pleb. It's like calling someone a peasant in my mind, you know. An older friend of mine once got offended at someone using the word, oh god, what was it? It wasn't a whore, it wasn't a slut, it wasn't something somewhat, barbed like that. It was wench. An older friend of mine in her 50s, I think, got upset at someone using the word wench, which to me is just a completely toothless, powerless word, right? It's like calling someone a flibbity gibber. It doesn't have any power, so I guess it's a generational thing. Anyway, the game makes you appreciate, because at the beginning you're stuck with the shittiest resources and the shittiest tools and the shittiest power source. So I was about to say I'm a quarter of the way through the tech tree, but I'm really not sure if that's true, because there's like 10 levels or something, and I'm on the 4th one, so that's not even a quarter, even, you know what I mean. But I suddenly realised that probably doesn't actually mean I'm a quarter of the way through the game, because they are taking exponentially longer and more effort to go through each one of these technology tiers. With each objective tier you get new technology, but of course the objectives are escalating, becoming more time consuming and more complicated. But I really appreciate any game where, like Saints Row 2, the reason I mentioned that is that at the beginning you have no money, you have no weapons, you're stealing cars to get around, and then by the end you can just casually buy a helicopter and casually use a minigun and a rocket launcher. You could, if you spend long enough in Saints Row 2, you can actually buy cheats. I'm sure this is the case in Saints Row 4, I'm pretty sure it's the case in Saints Row 2 as well. You can actually buy cheats like infinite ammo. and I just unlocked a gun with infinite ammo and spent most of the game using that. Like at the midway point, I just had a gun with infinite ammo, and it wasn't bad either. So, and Satisfactory has that appeal, which is funnily enough something I've always thought Minecraft needed more of, and it's only much later that they added, like, I'm probably going to end up comparing Satisfactory to Minecraft a lot, just because Minecraft has a really good early game and a fun mid game, but then when you get to the late game, you're kind of running out of obvious things to work towards, and you have to make your own fun, which is fine, except I don't think Minecraft actually does a tremendous job of giving you more technology to work towards, and this is only now not true several years after release, because they have added magic and shit. But at that point I've played probably 500 odd hours of Minecraft across 3 different versions or whatever, and I just I very recently, me and my partner, we tried to play Minecraft in co-op, just on local multiplayer, and the tragic thing is that's a really fun feature for a game like Minecraft, but I think I'm just done with Minecraft for a long time, because I got the Switch version, and I did have fun making a house when I first got it for a month or two, and then I kind of went, oh yeah, it's still Minecraft, and but I've always been looking, I think Terraria was like the next game that gave me that Minecraft itch, even though they're very different games really. But Satisfactory just reminds me of Minecraft a lot, because it's got that that sense of there's always something to do, there's always something to build, and even though it's not a survival game like Minecraft arguably is, and funnily enough, the comparison is even more valid actually, because there was a great old mod pack, which I've got no idea if this still exists, but there used to be a great old Minecraft mod pack called the Tech It Pack. I'm drinking some tea. And the Tech It Pack was like, you could have so much more machinery and auto drillers and all these things. You could eventually have like nuclear power. I was fascinated by the idea of having things be solar powered, but it is fun as well to just find a big pool of oil, and you'd have to build all the machinery and all the piping and everything to bring that fuel to wherever your burners are and wherever your generators are and your power banks and stuff. That was really fun, but I never got very far in it. I made a house, I tried to get some hydroelectricity going. I think being a mod, it was just so complicated in comparison to the main game, and the mods, because it was a mod pack, the mods didn't necessarily work together very well. And certainly back in the day, Minecraft didn't do a very good job of explaining how anything worked. So I'm talking like 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure I was still in uni when I was using these mods, so the game is almost unrecognisable now. But Satisfactory really scratches that itch for me, where I don't know what neurodivergence I have, okay, but I'm pretty sure I am on one of the spectrums, and I'm saying that not in a dismissive way. I'm just saying that in a kind of like, all my friends who are on the spectrum talk to me and they say, yeah, that reminds me of this. And I'm not, I don't have any official diagnosis. I actually had one expert say once that he had a feeling I might have something, but he couldn't give me an official diagnosis. Anyway, but whatever is wrong with my brain is really itched by Satisfactory, and the way that it just is, it's a constant escalation of things to do, and the strive to make your factory as efficient as possible is really fun, because you actually get you get an option at some point where your little smelter or whatever, every single smelter or assembler or something will actually have a percentage that says how efficient it is, but you can also just kind of tell by looking. Sorry, need a drink. You can just kind of tell by looking how efficient it is. My laptop's going to sleep. Because if there's a whole bunch of iron ore coming in, if you see the conveyor belt with the iron ore coming in, but it's just stopping every few seconds and then doesn't move for several seconds and then moves forward a few and then stops, that means it's not coming in efficiently, it's just being held up. Because the smelter can only hold, say, 100 ore, but it doesn't smelt 100 ore, it smelts 1 or 2 at a time. So it will hit that 100 limit and then the entire conveyor will stop until it's free to move in again. So that tells me that either you can split the conveyor with the ore coming in to send half of that ore somewhere else, or you can split the output that's coming out of the smelter to go somewhere more quickly. If it's being held up somewhere further along in the chain, you can just use your eyes, as well as using the display with the percentages. You can just use your eyes to see where it's being held up. There is combat, but I find there's even less combat than in something like Minecraft, because Minecraft has never been about the combat, and possibly for that reason the combat is very basic and rudimentary and not very balanced, to be honest. Whereas the combat in Satisfactory, at least so far, apparently there are caves you can go in with some terrifying spiders. I'm going to look up a picture of the spiders now to remind myself, because holy shit, when I saw one before, they were fucking... There was actually an arachnophobia mode in the options, which replaces the spiders with cats. Holy shit, okay, yeah, they are just like photorealistic spiders, basically. Oh Jesus. Oh my god, but the arachnophobia mode literally replaces the spiders with just JPEGs of cats. That's so funny. Oh my god. I like how they could have just replaced it with something less scary, but still not realistic looking, but something that looks within the world's logic of how it should. But they just replaced it with JPEGs of cats. That's such an incredible joke. Speaking of jokes, supposedly, and I haven't seen this, but supposedly in multiplayer, if your characters are running around, the character will occasionally do the Naruto run instead of the usual sprint animation, and I've never noticed this in my brief time playing multiplayer, but I believe that because the developers have shown a tendency for weird jokes. What the hell was I talking about? It is great. It is. I did burn out after a week of playing just solidly. I did burn out a little bit yesterday, but it's incredibly fun. And so me and my friend have a separate world going, and I resisted playing the game until we had our 3-hour session together last week, and then I immediately just went on and made my own world, and I've progressed past the point. I've progressed past the technology level that we reached in our multiplayer world, and it's because I was just having too much fun. At first I was like, no, I'll just sort of poke around a little bit, sort of get better at the game. Don't skip the tutorial, by the way. It's the kind of game where you might figure out what you're doing, but genuinely don't skip the tutorial on your first playthrough, because it's overly complicated. It's just it'll only seem overly complicated if you have if skipping the tutorial just puts you at tier level 3 or something straight away. So you'll have all this technology and resources, and you're not sure how any of them interact until you play around a bit. Whereas I would strongly recommend, it's not too handholdy or anything. I was initially disappointed that apparently there's no procedural generation in how the worlds are created. You just pick one of 4 world types essentially. It's difficulty levels. You get a really nice flat foresty place, or a icy place, or a rocky place, or a hell planet basically. But that's fine. I would, on some level, it would be cool if there was a randomizer mode, but you can always just set up shop in a different spot, and it is large. I've only just unlocked the ability to build a tractor, so I'm finally going to be able to drive around. I know at some point you also get a jetpack, which is amazing, because I don't know how it is in terms of actual traversal across the landscape, but a jetpack would be incredible for navigating my factory, especially because I've just started building vertically, because I had a big flat plane. Actually, I'll tell you this story. So I put my first factory in a kind of hilltop spot, which looked promising, but after a few technology levels I realized it was just messy and compact, and I'd unlocked the foundations, which is literally square blocks you can just put on the ground, square panels, big square panels, and it just makes it much easier to build things in a grid pattern, which is obviously if you just want to slam a smelter down, you can just do that. But once you progress beyond very basic factories, it's definitely more efficient to just build things in a grid whenever possible, and the foundations aren't too expensive. So I literally, I decided to just start over essentially, and I started building in a big flat plain with some iron ore deposits nearby. And once I'd sufficiently set up there, I just dismantled my old factory and started over. And that was really satisfying. At first I was like, oh, that's going to be a lot of work, but then once I realised how much space I had to play with, it took me no time at all to just rebuild. And it really highlighted as well the difference between when you start out, you're just kind of plonking things down, but once you know what to do, you can do it quicker and more efficiently, because you know not just the buttons but how the mechanics work. It sounds very generic when I say it like that. It reminds me a little bit of Space Chem, actually, because there's another factory game called Infinifactory, which I have also played about 5 hours of, and I like Infinifactory because it's basically a 3D version of Space Chem, which is an amazing old puzzle game from like 10 years ago, where the whole gimmick is that you're meant to be like rearranging atoms in reactors. So the system will have one input that comes in, you have to take that input and turn it into an output by spinning the atoms around and combining them and all that. And it does give me a little bit, the difference is that Space Chem is a strictly linear puzzle game, except the non-linearity just comes in the sense that your objective is clear and linear, but you can achieve that objective in whatever convoluted or inefficient way you want. The one fun thing, half the fun in Space Chem was just going back to old levels you'd done already with your newfound knowledge and going, oh, actually this is a really shitty, inefficient solution, I will replay this level and redesign the solution. And I've already had that feeling with Satisfactory. It's an amazing podcast game, by the way, because the sound effects and the music are cool and satisfying. The music is actually really nice, and the sound effects are nice and chunky too. When you play something down, it's like plonk, and when your smelters are all going, it's like yeah. You know what factories sound like, but it's a good sound. But it is an amazing podcast game. You could easily go through, for example, 33 hours of podcasts just playing Satisfactory. I was apologising to my friend actually because I felt bad that I'd made my own world and then progressed beyond the point that we'd got to in our multiplayer world, and she said, no, that's fine. And I said, well, I guess I'm not looking up guides or anything. Unless I encounter some sort of bug or real headache, I won't look anything up, but I am getting tips from my friend. Which in a funny way always seems more fair to me. I can't explain that rationally. I don't like to look things up if I can avoid it, but I will just ask my friend how to do things. And I said, well, I guess it's fine, because whenever we next play, I'm going to show you my world, and you can say, well, this is okay, but you can do this, and this better. So it'll still feel like a different experience when we have our own world, when we do that session again, because I'll see how she's putting things down and I'll go, oh cool, you're doing this more efficiently than me, and I haven't unlocked that conveyor splitter or whatever yet. I want to get nuclear power, but to be honest, I've currently got 4 coal generators on my factory. Oh, it's so cool, the coal is so great. It is one of the most exciting moments is when the game told me I could get coal, because I could finally stop babysitting the biomass generators. How coal works is just like with iron and everything. It comes from a particular source. You have a scanner that tells you just ping the scanner. You can only scan for resources once the game unlocks them for you, but you scan for coal, and it was like 600 meters away, and I'm like, oh fuck, that's ages away. It turned out not to be that too far away, but it was a little quest, because I went off and then got killed by some monsters, so I had to zap them to death with my zapper stick. And then I found the coal, but it was on the other side of a ravine, so I'm like, oh no. And as I was trying to build something to get over there, because you can just build foundations or pipes or whatever to get across, one of the monsters I hadn't noticed actually ran up by me and charged me off the cliff. And that was the only annoying bug I found so far, really. Is it seems like if you die by falling off a cliff, your chest, I call them coffins, your resource coffin doesn't respawn at the top of the cliff, it respawns where your body lands, is from my experience. And it seems to be like a death zone down at the bottom of the cliff. I'm not sure if it's actually possible to get down there, at least not without a jetpack. So my shit was just gone, basically. But that does encourage you to not take a bunch of valuable shit with you when you go into a dangerous zone. Animals don't seem to respawn in your immediate vicinity, so you'll clear them out of an area and then they seem to just stay gone, because I've been hanging around my factory for 10 hours now or something, and the animals that were there initially are just gone. Well, there are no hostile animals. There is a big four-legged giraffe dinosaur that kind of comes through and doesn't do anything, so I don't even bother feeding it to the biomass generator because it doesn't do anything. So have a drink. But I finally got the coal seam, and I plonk a miner down, and I had to feed conveyor belts from the mining machine all the way back like a kilometre to my main factory area. And then you also have to find water, which there is no scanner for water, at least that I've got. You have to physically build something tall and look around for a lake. It can't just be a river. The game tells you that most rivers aren't deep enough. It has to be like a solid body of water. So I literally built a tower and looked around in a couple of spots until I found some water. And you have to feed the coal generator back at the main base. You have to feed it coal and a steady supply of water, which need their own pipes rather than conveyors. And from one lake, I've now got 2 water extractors. So 2 pumps basically, which are feeding 2 coal generators each. So I've got 4 coal generators powering my fucking monster. I have noticed that the game slowly takes longer to load when you've got more shit in your save file, which is funny because my friend briefly showed me her world, which is apparently her second world, but she's on like the penultimate tier or something. She's never got to the end of the game, but she's on like the penultimate one, I think. And she's got like a nuclear plant, she's got a train system for travelling and moving resources around. We were going around, she's taken over most of the continent with her fucking train system and multiple little factories. And she was like, yeah, that's my main factory, and it's just this huge abomination with a nuclear plant next to it. And she's like, oh, that's my old factory, I don't even do anything there anymore, that's just an empty shell now, and it's still this huge building. And I'm like, why is there so much shit here? And she's like, oh, I can't be bothered to destroy it, it's not hurting anyone. And now we get to the environmental concerns of your activities in Satisfactory. If you don't know me, I'm one of those soy beta cuck commie pinkos. And I am obviously therefore very much an environmentalist. I very much think it's bad that capitalism is destroying the planet in order to enrich the fortunes of 100 billionaires. I think it's bad that most people suffer and most of the planet is ravaged by the actions and selfish needs of a few inherited wealth assholes, basically. So it's funny, therefore, that I enjoy games like Wolfenstein and, well, that's more in terms of violence. That was actually a particularly bad example because in Wolfenstein you kill Nazis. Let's just stick to the point. It's funny as an environmentalist-minded person that I really enjoy Satisfactory, which is just unabashedly a game about colonialism and extraction of resources and polluting. You land on this pristine alien planet, at least in my case, and tear all the bushes out of the floor to feed your biomass generator so you can pump a huge polluting iron foundry. You then upgrade to coal, which is vastly more destructive than just burning trees, and eventually it seems like you can unlock nuclear power. I think there is another power source because there are these strange power slugs, which funnily enough reminds me of Lego Rock Raiders, which is a game from my childhood. A spectacularly buggy and limited game, but it has a cult following because it was awesome. God damn it, my throat. I guess it just goes to show though, right? It's like how I love a lot of violent games and movies, but I'm actually very squeamish in real life around just... not just guns, but anything dangerous or violent, really. Because my brain, funnily enough, can tell the difference between a fantasy fiction fun time escapism and real violence, which is bad and should be avoided generally. It's interesting. I just think about that a lot because it's ironic, and also we've been in the middle of a heat wave for a week now in the UK. It's not as horrific as the 2018 heat wave, which caused my skin to die and everything else to die. In fact, the 2018 heat wave went on for so long in the UK in 2018 that like all the grass was scorched and everything so much that they actually found some Roman ruins that had just been hidden below some heath or something for centuries. And it's like, well, I'm glad something good came of the apocalypse. But you know, it's I didn't really have anything else to add to that point. I think it's just like whenever you try and this is a bit of a brief tangent, I guess, but whenever you try and have these conversations about like art criticism and applying different critical lenses to enjoying art, there is a vocal minority of chuds basically who are like, oh, you think everything is bad just because it's got some possible questionable interpretation that you don't like. And I'm like, no. If I was to take Satisfactory on its face, I would assume that some monster had made it, some monster like oil baron person who just wanted to destroy the planet for money. But no, it's because, removed from real life context and consequence, it is actually a lot of fun to tear up the planet and shove it all in an oil generator and just eternal escalation, eternal the pursuit of profit and the pursuit of power and domination. Quite frankly, it feels, in a fictional context, it's very fun and satisfying to feel like you've taken this raw, idyllic world and turned it into a factory hellscape. If you wanted, I suppose, you could limit yourself to just using biomass, which is at least it's definitely more environmentally responsible than fucking fossil fuels. But I feel like but even then, actually, and I'm sorry for going on this tangent for so long, but even then, the fossil fuels in this game, not only does there not actually appear to be any environmental consequence outside of the space that you tear up and use up, there doesn't seem to be climate change in this game, you know. Not only that, but the fossil fuels are actually unlimited. They are literally unlimited in the game universe. Or maybe it takes 10,000 hours of gameplay for you to suddenly encounter the climate change level. It's funny because I took a day's break off Satisfactory, and now I've just been watching this footage on loop in the background, and just talking about it really makes me want to go in the other room and play some more. I'm actually really glad. My partner mentioned, and they were the first person to mention this, I used to have fraps on my old PC, and then I had the Nvidia thing, and then I had the AMD equivalent that just lets you record game footage, and then they seemed to stop supporting that, at least on my, I guess, old and shit graphics card, and that really annoyed me because basically one day I updated my drivers and was punished by no longer having this recording software I like to use. But my partner was the first person to say, oh, have you ever tried OBS, which I don't know what that's short for, obligatory recording software. It's technically a joke. So I was like, oh no, what's that? Oh, it's a free course software. Oh, that's perfect, it's fine. And I install it. Not only is there like there's no viruses on it, there's no price involved, it's totally free. It seems to be open source from my brief research. And it just works like a dream. Like, the only game I've had any issues with it so far is I randomly tried to play Mirror's Edge, and I think it might just be the PC version of Mirror's Edge, to be honest, rather than the software, but it did crash after 20 minutes, so, you know, be warned, I guess. If you're trying to play Mirror's Edge from 2009 on your PC with OBS, then be aware it appears to crash, at least, anyway. But now I want to record like an hour of background footage while I run around playing Satisfactory. It's just really, really good. If you can get it on sale, it's absolutely worth it, but to be honest, I wouldn't have regretted... Actually, I thought of a game to compare it to. I've played 40 hours of No Man's Sky. Half of that was with a friend, and half of it was me just firing around by myself, and I would say I've made 3 or 4 different concerted efforts. Have you ever had a game where you've played a lot of it, but that's only because you've made multiple efforts to try and make it click with you. Like, it doesn't click with you, and then you go away for a year and you come back and you're like, right, I want to enjoy this game this time. I've convinced myself I'm going to enjoy this game, but it just keeps not clicking. I think I've given up trying to click with No Man's Sky. I did have this with New Vegas, Fallout New Vegas, where I kept creating new characters, getting about 10 hours in, then getting frustrated and trying a new character, trying something else. And it was only in the last 6 months or a year I actually finally clicked with it and beat the main campaign. And I did start the DLC, but I kind of did that too soon, to be honest. I might need more of a break to get back into that. But I don't think that's going to happen with No Man's Sky. Whereas in less time, Satisfactory had me hooked. Within a day of playing Satisfactory, I was completely on board. And they are quite different games, really, but No Man's Sky these days does have a similar mechanic of digging up resources to build and expand your base. And I would rather have one, not just one planet, but one landmass, like in Satisfactory. One of the core issues, I think, with No Man's Sky is you've got this huge universe, but that just means it's all procedurally generated, and that means that nothing really stands out. There'll be a toxic planet, there'll be a nice planet. One of the only memorable planets I ever remember finding in No Man's Sky was a planet with absolutely nothing wrong with it, which was shocking, because usually there's everything wrong. Usually it's either toxic, or there's no oxygen, or there's really strong winds, or it's really cold. And one time I found a planet where there was nothing wrong with it, and it was great, and I had a great time until I had to leave to do something else, and that was terrible. Whereas in Satisfactory, you do explore. You explore around, you get quickly killed by the local fauna until you upgrade. I have found some more combat upgrades I could invest in. Because I think I mentioned there are apparently caves you can go into, and I assume you'll need to do that to get some resources of some kind. But there's no way I'm going to be able to fight these spiders, because I can barely fight the basic little rhino things that run around on the overworld. And you get a space elevator early on, which sounded really dramatic. I thought that might be the end of the game at first, but no, that's where you have to send a lot of your resources. That's where, when you make all these pieces, you send them up into the space elevator, and it comes down with a big hook. And I've got no idea if the actual science behind. I'm 90% sure they're purely hypothetical, but the hypothetical science behind space elevators, I'm not sure how much sense that actually makes in real life, because it would be an incredible engineering challenge, and it would also seem like you would have to guard it really well, because it would seem really easy for someone who takes issue with NASA or whatever to just blow it up, and it would cause unthinkable damage when this huge cable then came spiraling down to Earth, and presumably the other end would fly off into the sky, and but it's really cool to just send things up in the space elevator, Even in a world of Satisfactory that has almost no plot or lore, it's still very easy to get immersed, and it's extremely fun to. If you're someone who used to like Lego and or still likes Lego, I don't judge. If you're someone who likes Lego and likes making things and making them more efficient, I will warn you. I can see this kind of because I had this with New Vegas. It was I've had games in the past where I really want to like them and I keep throwing myself at them. But I've also had games I really, really like, and then I kind of keep playing them to the point where I'm burned out and I'm not actually enjoying myself anymore, and I need to take a break, but I don't for a few hours. I warn you that if it is Satisfactory, could be one of those games if you have a strange brain like me, because I did. I picked it up yesterday morning, and I was like, "Am I actually having fun right now?" And I eventually decided I wasn't, so I put it down for the day. But now I am thinking about it again, because I'm watching this footage and I'm talking about it, and it's making me think I still have so much shit to build. It doesn't help that I can literally see the counter in the top right of the corner. You can theoretically do whatever you like in Did I just call it Infinifactory? Jesus Christ. In Satisfactory, you can theoretically do whatever you like. It's just you have to do the objectives to unlock the technology. But other than that, you can just do what you like. It's just I find it fun. It gives you an objective to work towards that's fun and slightly different every time. the way that I am a sucker because I always like slightly retool my factory every time the objective changes. I really resent having to dig anything out of the ground manually, so I go to a lot of effort reconfiguring. My precious flat efficient factory is increasingly less flat and efficient because it's not that I'm running out of space, it's just that I don't want to move all the machines around every time. I want to make one different thing. So I've ended up I've crossed the streams. The conveyor belts are interweaving with each other too much. The game is quite generous. You can just you can have conveyor belts that bump into each other in ways that doesn't seem like they would logically be able to and stuff like that. But I know that, for instance, whenever you unlock trains, the trains do have collision now, for instance, because my friend had a funny story where the trains didn't originally have collision, and then they patched the collision in. So my friend opened up her save file one day and all the trains just bumped into each other instantly. I also personally really prefer when I can use a controller in a game generally, and you can play Satisfactory with a controller, but there are several buttons that doesn't seem possible to map onto the controller at the same time. So I would literally just have the keyboard nearby, and for instance, whenever I have to delete anything, I have to press F in order to equip the deleter tool, but then I can just use the controller from that point. I just wanted to mention that because that was one of my main concerns. It's an amazing podcast game. That doesn't mean it's for something that's not finished, and I'm not sure they have a set 1.0 release date yet. It is already worth the money if you ask me. It's already very addictive. You can play it with your friends. I don't know what the player count is. I think it was 8 players or something. And it's a great time. You do have to get it on either Steam or Epic, I think. I have very few bad things to say about it so far, Don't consider this a full review by any means, but as someone who, I think after playing 30 hours of a game, you can kind of take my opinion as at least half worth listening to, Absolutely. So I guess the question is, do I find Satisfactory to be satisfactory? Yes, pretty great. Probably go play it.